Welcome back to the She Does This podcast. I'm your host, Geordie Lucas. Wow, what a difference a week can make in a pandemic. Sydney, Queensland are in lockdown. There's restrictions all over the place. And for once, Melbourne is the place to be. I just wanted to take this opportunity to remind you all to just please be kind to one another. I am seeing so many arguments on social media about who's got it the worst, the vaccine rollout. I'm seeing people being trolled for having the vaccine. All I am going to say on this is that I trust medical science. I trust the scientists and the science behind vaccines. There are so many diseases, hepatitis, polio, tetanus, that we don't have to worry about because of vaccines. Just please be responsible with where you are getting your information. Please read qualified sources, and please be responsible with what you're then posting to social media. If you're interested in listening, Casey Beros was a guest a few weeks ago, and she's one of the country's most respected health journalists. She has some great insights into what's happening within the media at the moment, so I'll leave a link to that episode in the show notes. This week on the site, we've compiled an edit of puffer jackets for all budgets. The puffer jacket is one of the biggest trends of the season, so you will find one at every price point in that edit for you. Let's get to this week's guest, CEO of Ella Bache, Pippa Hallis. We talk about how she rose to the top of a family business, why motherhood was the best thing to happen to her career, and how she's raising money for women's cancer after losing her own mum. Here's my chat with Pippa Hallis. Pippa, thank you so much for joining us this week. You are the CEO of the well-known and much loved and trusted beauty brand Ella Bache. Thank you so much for being with us this week.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's great to connect with you, and it's great to be here. And particularly because COVID has thrown up so many things, and I'm glad this is going ahead. So it's all good.
So you are the CEO of Ella Bache. Your great aunt was Ella Bache. So you have grown up with this brand. What's it like to be the CEO of this family-run company?
Yeah, look, it's a really amazing feeling to be a CEO of a company that's been in your blood your whole life. I mean, I don't know any different. I mean, I've worked. I feel like I've had two parts to my career. One part in the family business, and before that in advertising and in corporate land. So I feel like it feels difficult if you're passionate about what you do.
Yeah.
So I'm really passionate about this brand, and I'm passionate about the products, and lots of the amazing people I get to work with each day. So it doesn't feel like a chore at all. So And I also think, when you grow up in a family business, or in a family that's in business, like other people I know, you learn the value of hard work pretty quickly when you're young. It's something that I have ever shied away from.
Yeah. So tell us about your life as a young woman growing up, your future goals and ambitions. What did school and university look like for you?
So I grew up on the northern beaches in Sydney. I feel like I had a pretty, free and I'm not going to say idyllic childhood, because my parents got divorced when I was quite young.
Mm-hmm.
But I rode horses. I swam in the ocean every day. I spent a lot of time in nature on one side of the coin, but on the other side of the coin, I worked from a young age. I know I was quite driven from a young age. I didn't always know what I wanted to do, but I certainly, did pretty well at school and had good friends and had a good time, and went on to do a Bachelor of Business at City, and then just I guess had a lot of desire to go and explore the world, which is what I did on and off in my 20s.
Was the goal always to work within Ella Bache?
No, not at all. I think, I grew up around it. I spent a lot of time in school holidays, in the factory, and I got really good at packing and, filling jars of cream. And on reflection, my dad always spoke a lot about the company and what was going on in the company, even from a young age. I don't think he did that deliberately. Well, I know he didn't do that deliberately. Just part. But I grew up in the 90s, and there was a lot of creative people around me in my childhood. A lot of my dad is highly creative. He's entrepreneurial, but also a lot of his friends worked in advertising. And I know that advertising in the 90s, they just look like they're having the best fun in the world. So when I left university, that's that's what I did. And I did that, until I jumped ship to family business when I was 30. So I very much had an open mind about where I wanted to end up, but I knew I always have loved magazines and products and creativity and, advertising and all that kind of stuff, and consumer behavior and how people think and tick. And so, advertising gave me a wonderful platform. I learned so much from fantastically smart people, and I worked on a lot of different types of businesses at a really young age. And then I had this moment when I turned 30 that I felt like I either needed to go back overseas and pursue my career in advertising there, or I jumped ship and try my hand at the family business, which is what I decided to do.
Yeah. And tell us about your growth within Ella Bache. So you said that you started with Ella Bache when you were 30. So where was that in the business? Was that in advertising or?
Yeah, so I started in the marketing team. And it was a really fun, it was a really hard experience, actually. I had no clue what my last name was, how it was going to impact people.
Yeah.
So, and we hadn't had a family member in the business for probably 20 years. And my father owned the business, but hadn't worked day to day in the business for a very long time. So all of a sudden, all my prior experience had gone out the window, and it was my last name that mattered. And so, being a really social person and always having lots of people around me at work in advertising, I kind of felt quite lonely coming in here, and really had to navigate, being a family member in a family business through some pretty strong life lessons around perception and how you handle yourself and visibility. And, I had a lot of eyes on me at a really young age. So, fast forward till I was 32, and the CEO at the time left the business. And I guess the board at that time felt like, even though I was quite young and probably not quite ready, it was certainly in my own, great opportunity for me to be the CEO, rather than bring in an external non-family member. So that's what happened. And I had a baptism by fire, that's for sure. But I had worked in advertising, and I knew the consumer. I knew that everything had to start with the consumer, and so I knew this brand really well. I knew the products really well, but quickly learnt all the other parts of the business, and learnt how to be a leader. Probably faking it till I made it a lot of the time. But throughout my career, when I haven't known what to do, and probably COVID was another milestone.
Yeah.
You tend to, probably everyone does this, but you tend to go back to what you've learnt from, the mentors and the people above you. So I do find I resort back to, those lessons that Ella taught me or my father taught me, when I have to go back to basics and go through hard times.
So you said baptism by fire. Was there a little bit of pushback from some people? Did you maybe feel like you had to prove yourself more and prove that you were in that position, not just because of your surname?
Oh, 100%. So And also to myself, if I'm really honest. Like I had to, I had imposter syndrome big time, which I'm sure, you've spoken to other people about. So I had to not only prove to, particularly when I walked into a boardroom with, I don't know, mainly, males who were 20 years older than me around the table, that I knew what I was doing. Yeah. Also, a lot of our franchisees, we've got 120 franchisees around Australia. Also, I had to create my own team. And also to myself, I had to prove that, I was worthy of being a CEO. And I felt really comfortable at the time, even introducing myself to people as, head of marketing. But to introduce myself to people as the CEO was a totally different experience for me.
Mm.
Yeah.
So most leadership positions in this country are taken by men. How do you set the tone as a female leader, and what sort of assets do you think females bring to leadership roles?
Look, I think there's probably a few things here. I think it goes back to your values, and you have to be really, really clear on your values and what you want. And that's for everyone. But I think I grew up in a time when I reported into a lot of females who had to be men, and they had to act like men to succeed in their roles in certainly the 90s. But I feel like there's been a shift with that, certainly for my generation, that we don't have to be men. We can bring our own authenticity to the table. We can use our strengths, and I guess there's a generalized view that women are a lot more empathetic and a lot more emotional and a lot more warm as leaders. So, but again, it goes back to the individual, and you just got to know what your strengths are, and not be afraid to play to those strengths.
So what do you think your strengths are?
So my strengths are definitely strategy, and the vision and concepts and creativity, and people and people management and leadership. I've had to obviously work on trying to be a balanced person, and I've definitely learned the hardcore commercial side of the business, and I can do that with my eyes shut now, but that's been a big learning curve for me. And getting into the details of the numbers and the operations, and the tools were coming from a marketing background were not my core experience when I was younger. So I learned pretty quickly that I didn't have to do this journey alone. And there was a lot of other amazing people out there who were on a similar journey to me. So I was fortunate that my intuition, more than anything, when I was in my early 30s, told me that I needed to get some really great mentors and role models around me. Because I'm a type of person, and my style is quite open. And I didn't want to do it alone, and I wanted to collaborate my way through it. So that's what I did.
So you're also a mother. How did motherhood change the way that you view yourself as a career woman?
I think motherhood was in many ways the best thing that happened to my career. I think, before I was a mum, I mean, the business has always been my first baby, but before I was a mum, I would be the first one in, the last one out, and I was probably doing everyone else's jobs for them as well. So, motherhood really taught me to be a lot more deliberate around my role, around my time, around my boundaries, around what I say yes to and what I don't say yes to, and that your time is a valuable resource. So it enabled me to, I guess, step back and empower people underneath me a lot more, and set my own rules.
Yeah. So what would your advice be for mums? I know that there's so many mums, and myself included, there's there's this real struggle of wanting to pursue your career, but then also feeling guilty for perhaps not spending time with your children. How did you navigate that and work through that yourself? And what would your advice be for mums finding themselves in that situation?
So I think it's about, I mean, every mum is so different, and I don't want to come across as telling people that I have it all sorted, because I don't. But I think one of the best pieces of advice that someone gave me before I had my first child was, you just got to keep adjusting. So whilst you need to design your life, and I'm a big advocate for sitting down and mapping out your day, your week, your months, and being really, really structured and organized. But within that, some days the business is going to need me more, and some days my kids are going to need me more, and that's okay. You just got to keep adjusting. And I don't really have an answer for the motherhood guilt. I still get that every day, but I think it's more about making sure that you have that quality time with your kids, so you feel fulfilled as a mother, and your cup is full. I think the kids are fine most of the time. It's fulfilling your needs.
Yeah. And it's obviously great for them to see a mum like you that is achieving and leading and sort of, shaking that mold up of that stereotypical, mum stays at home or has a lesser career, whereas you're out there, the CEO of this major company. Like, what an achievement for your children to witness.
Yeah, I hope so. Like, you never really do know how it's all going to pan out. But I guess going back to what I learned as a child, and that was to value hard work. It was to value creativity and innovation, and make a contribution to the world in whichever way you do, and feel progress. So I hope that my kids also learn that from me, that it's awfully satisfying to do these things in life, whatever they may choose to do.
Yeah. So in June, Ella Bache are donating $1 from every online sale to women's cancer charity Cherish. So can you tell us a bit more about the why behind this?
So Cherish is an amazing foundation, I guess. It's been set up by a gynecological surgeon who's based in Brisbane, Andreas, and he's the leading surgeon and, I guess, researcher and innovator in treating gynecological cancers. So my mum sadly passed away 3 years ago from uterine cancer, which is cancer in your uterus, and I had never heard of that before. So, there's obviously different types of gynae cancers, such as ovarian, but I quickly learnt from my horrendous experience with my mum that this area of cancer was unfortunately had a huge impact on the female population, and only 30% of people who are diagnosed with one of these female cancers survive, because the knowledge from GPs in diagnosing the issue to treatments, which in my experience were decades and decades behind other cancer treatments. So many women have suffered, and I just don't want to see the next generation of women suffering like this generation has, because of the lack of funding and the lack of research, essentially. So that's the why. And so the month of June, we try and do whatever we can. Last week I spent 4 days with some amazing women and men too, who have been impacted by different gynae cancers and are still being impacted by gynae cancers. We trekked through the Larapinta Trail in the Australian desert to raise money and So we've raised, I think the foundation's raised about $170,000 so far, which is great. But obviously every dollar counts towards, solving this horrendous, illness and disease.
And how was that for you? You're losing your mother, but then you're also the CEO of this business. How did you cope during that time? I can't imagine how hard that must have been.
Oh, it was hard. I think it was the first time in my life that I learned that I couldn't solve everything. I'm such a fixer and I'm such a solver and I'm such a right, we need best answer and the best people. And I couldn't solve, that for Mum, which was extremely challenging for me to watch her suffer like that. But also I think, during that time, and other challenging times in my life, I just have to compartmentalize my life, emotionally in my head. And so when I'm at work, I'm super present for everyone who needs me here. When I'm at home with my kids or my husband, I'm really present. And when I was with Mum, I was really present. So I just find being able to compartmentalize your life and emotions like that is a bit helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would your message or advice be to women who are struggling with the loss of their own mothers?
Oh, gosh. I can only talk from my own experience, but I think, there are so many amazing women out there who, through my experience, after I lost Mum, I had an opportunity to write a book. Serendipitously, that opportunity came along, and one of the things I got out of writing the book that I didn't expect to was the kindness and generosity of women. And I think, that my advice is never underestimate how many amazing people there are out there. But I know women, particularly of, my mum's generation, don't ask for help. And sometimes we just need to talk to our friends in our network or reach out to, people who've gone through similar things and just have a conversation. And I think sharing quite often helps, like, you're not alone in these circumstances. And that in itself, is a really positive thing.
Yeah. Well, Pippa, thank you so much for joining us. Again, $1 from every online sale will go to Cherish. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for thank you so much for the opportunity, and great to chat to you.
You too.
And for the COVID silver lining podcast.
I know. Thank you so much, Pippa.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the She Does This podcast. If you have loved this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen, and we'll be back with you next week.